live from the SEN studios here at Optus Stadium. 4 Dockers, including the All-Australian squad of 44. Corey Wagner's season is over. Plenty of coaching changes at Carlton, and West Coast get their man. Harley Reid commits for another 2 years. Huge day of sport. Get involved. Mark Duffield's going to join us. We're going to hear from Bryce Cotton, Bella Lewis from the West Coast Eagles AFLW team, and Dom Sheed. He is in here, as he is every second Tuesday. He's been off gallivanting around Western Australia, just enjoying retirement life. Welcome to you, Dom.
Thanks for having me, Hayes. It's good to be back, mate, but it's getting to the pointy end of the season now, so we've got a good few weeks ahead of us.
How do you feel going into the finals when you haven't been a part of it? I used to hate that time. I used to try and get out of Australia when particularly we had to watch the West Coast Eagles more often than not play finals.
Yeah, it's hard, but in saying that, you have the best teams going at it, so it's always good viewing. You know, you want to be playing, and you know, now I'm retired, it might be a bit easier, but the last few years haven't been as enjoyable, mate.
How was it watching the West Coast Eagles on the weekend? I'm sure at halftime you're thinking, geez, the future looks bright. By the end of the game, you're probably scratching your head a little bit.
Yeah, probably a bit of a story of our whole season, right? You know, you play a couple good quarters of footy and just not able to put 4 quarters together, and we have lapses, and then the game's over. So boys will go away. They did their review yesterday. I didn't sit in on that, but they did their off-season review and what they'll work on and come back again next year, mate. But I think they got to have a bit of a break, get away from the club and reset, go again.
I don't think anybody was listening to what McQualter said in that meeting, because one man spoke, and that was Harley Reid. We've just had a text come through from Cam Hayes. What a day. Is it just me, or does this feel like a day in which the Eagles' direction is finally heading up? So the big news that Harley Reid re-signs with the Eagles until 2028. It's a 2-year extension, and there is no trigger option. So there was talk prior to this that there'd be a 9-year trigger option included in that. I'm led to believe capacity to hit $2 million with incentives, but that is massive for West Coast. First and foremost, that he's staying. Secondly, he's staying on West Coast terms, not on the terms of what Harley and his management had floated prior to that.
Yeah, and good on Harley. Him and his management, they took the time to actually get it right for both parties, and that's what happened. So after what's been another tough year, to have, you know, our number 1 pick staying for another couple of years and locked and loaded, that's awesome news.
Is it big for the morale of the group that it's been a pretty tough 4 years, Dom, and to get this sort of news, and as we just heard from Cam, it could be a sign that next year it could start trending upwards?
Absolutely. You know, he gets another pre-season with all of the other young blokes, and, you know, hopefully they can take another step forward once again. So we saw the footy that he played towards the back end of the year when he got a bit fitter, more midfield time, what he can do, and you know we expect him to take another level, go to another level again next year with the rest of the playing group. But yeah, after what's a lean year, mate, it's some good news for the club, and I would have been disappointed if he left because he's a good young kid. So the fact that he's putting faith in, you know, the West Coast Eagles is awesome.
Have you always seen from when you were there early on in the season that he had the drive to want to be with the group and he was invested in what you're trying to do?
Yeah, he was invested. He worked extremely hard to get his fitness up, and he had a few injuries here and there throughout the pre-season. So another year with the strength and conditioning staff, he's 100% buying in, which is great. And he's dealt with the noise all year about this contract situation really, really well. And it's a credit to him that he got it right and took his time, and now onwards and upwards, and we can talk about it in 12 months' time again, Hayes.
It's not going to go away, is it?
It's not going to go away.
So you hear it from Chad Warner, signed for 2 years, Wanganeen Millerer. They're just delaying the inevitable to see what happens in the future. But do you think he'll come back super motivated and super fit? Probably unlike he did this year, where he probably came back not in the right condition.
Yeah, I mean, he was an 18, 19-year-old kid, right? Learning what standards are and, you know, being, you know, your body is your number 1 asset, look after it. You know, it takes a while to learn that as a young kid. And, you know, ever since he come back to pre-season, he did do it. He did everything he can. So they'll put a program in place for him and for the rest of the boys, and they will be expected to do it, and Mini sort of dropped the hammer in that sense that we need to rock up in good enough nick to get through a pre-season. So hopefully he does that, and I'll back him 100% for sure.
The other big news today down at Dockers land is the All-Australian squad was announced, and there are 4 players included: Caleb Sarong, Jordan Clark, Andrew Brayshaw and Luke Jackson included in that. West Coast this year didn't have a player included, but massive news. Do you think they will get 1, 2, 3 or 4 into the final All-Australian team, Dom?
Geez, I think they should get 2, right? They should get 2 out of the 4 at least. But when was the last time they had 4 people nominated in the squad? Would have been a while ago.
Yeah, I think they've had 3. I was a part of 3 when it was Peter Bell, Matthew Pavlich and myself, and I think they've done it another time as well. But let's get to a man who knows plenty. He does a terrific job on Mornings with Mark Duffield. We want his opinion. Duff, welcome to the run home.
Hi guys, how you going?
We're going well, mate. How are you feeling? Did you see this coming as early as today with the big announcement of Harley Reid?
There are a few whispers around at the start of the week that it might happen this week. I think it's a really good outcome for West Coast. It's certainly a better outcome than the ambit claim, I would put it as, that the Connors Management Group had put to West Coast initially, which was 2 + 9, which was kind of like a lot of risk on the club and only sort of minimal reward when given that they were only guaranteed the 2 years of Harley's service. I think pay him now for what he brings. They've got 3 years from now to convince him to stay further. And I think the significance is that in that 3-year window, Chad Warner will come out of contract at Sydney, and I'm getting some reasonably strong mail that Chad Warner is a good chance to return and a good chance to want to join West Coast. So you could be looking at a situation where at the end of 2027, you've not only got Harley, but you've got Chad, and the presence of either will improve the chances of keeping the other. So I think this is a good outcome for West Coast. And I think while we don't know a lot of details about money yet, I would say that the money doesn't really matter, given that it's a shorter term contract, given that West Coast will have plenty of room in their salary cap. And they get to keep the kid and convince him to stay for longer, but also to explore his football ability and the influence he can have on the group, because we've seen the enormous potential there, and we've seen that there is still a way to go and a lot of room for improvement in terms of how he gets ready to play AFL footy. So it buys them some time for all of that, and I just heard Dom's words just before you brought me on, and I think the key to come back in good nick, to get ready to start and complete a pre-season, those things are going to be really key for Harley.
Speculated that there is no 9-year option included. Can we be conclusive on that? Because it would be in West Coast's best interest if there was a handshake agreement, which you can't put on the record. It's got to be that handshake agreement. Do you think there's any chance that could be still in play?
Look, I can't see how there's anything contractually enforceable in play. Even some of the discussions I had with people who are pretty well connected in footy and understand, contract law as it exists in footy, they were highly sceptical that the AFL would even allow a contract like the one that had been initially put to West Coast, or at least the one that was flagged publicly that had been put to West Coast, and that certainly no one publicly disputed either the money or the terms of the contract. So that would be the AFL would view that as a number of red flags, I think, attached to that deal. It was just too much risk for not enough reward for the club. But this one, he gets to front up and hopefully develop significantly over the next 3 seasons as a young player. And we've already seen what he can do when he's got his mind on the job and when he's got his body in, somewhere even close to being the sort of condition he needs to be in to play the sort of roles he's going to be expected to play. There is a hell of a footballer in there somewhere waiting to get out. So I think this is a good outcome for West Coast, and I don't think there would be any significant add-on to the contract in terms of an option that Harley has.
Who do you think will be playing alongside him next year from other AFL clubs right now, given speculation on a few?
Yeah, a bit early to say on that, I reckon. But what I would say is I think West Coast, they will have 3 first-round picks, we think, because obviously there'll be pick 1 for finishing last. There'll be pick 2, which is the compensation we think they will get for Oscar Allen. And then there is Hawthorn's first-round pick. So they need to use that to bring in top-end young talent. And then, depending on what happens with Liam Ryan, if Liam Ryan were to shift to St Kilda and if they could get a second rounder plus their own second rounder, and if they could use those two to maybe bring in some more mature bodies, just to put as scaffolding around the kids, I think, because they're going to be very young. And obviously, while we would all like to think that Elliot Yeo could get back and play, something approximating a full season, there's no guarantee of that. So some older, harder bodies like Liam Baker, like Jack Graham, those guys that will be able to stand up and go for 4 quarters and buffer some of the physical pressure that the kids will be under. I think that would be a good outcome for West Coast at this next draft.
What were your initial thoughts when the squad of 44 All-Australian team dropped earlier today?
I'm wondering how the Doggies can have 5 in the All-Australian squad and not make the 8. That's what I'm wondering. It's not the first time that's happened, and it probably tells the tale of the Western Bulldogs, doesn't it? An extreme top end and a long tail, and I think that was what Fremantle were able to exploit when they put them to the sword on Sunday in a really impressive performance. So there was that. The rest of it was probably no great surprises there. There's good players that have missed out here, as there always is. And there'll be a lot of good players miss out when they cut the 20 or so to get back to the actual team. So it was a good outcome for Fremantle. I think the 4 is about right, and I think they're the right 4. I would say that probably 2 would be their best outcome, I think, for the actual team. You would think probably Sarong and Clark would be their best chances, I think. Luke Jackson has had a really good season, but you would suspect they're going to pick Max Gawn as the number 1 ruck, and they're probably going to pick someone like a Riley Thilthorpe as the supposed backup ruck with the ability to play as a forward. That would be the way I would think they would go on that. So I suspect Luke Jackson might get squeezed out of the final team.
Is there any names that come to mind, Duff, that missed out on the squad?
Mate, there's always a lot of good players that miss out on a squad like that, as there should be. I guess it's the AFL. It's the supposedly the toughest sporting competition in Australia. Probably, if you look, say, across town at West Coast, Liam Baker would probably have been the best credentialed one from the Eagles this year, but probably short of that level. I was interested to see them pick Mark Keane as one of the power defenders. That's probably a credit to him and the season he has had. Although I thought maybe the Crows were probably more likely to get one of Worrell and Keane in as opposed to both of them. So look, it's a tough squad to make. I heard Nathan Buckley talking about it last night on the couch. He said there's a lot of very good players miss. When you sit down to pick these things, and I've done it a few times when I was the senior writer at the West Australian, it's bloody hard, and you always get significant argument over the ones that don't get in. I'm pleased to see Jack Gunston get in. To have the season that he's had at the age that he's had it, I think is an absolute credit to him, and he's playing probably career best footy. So pleased to see him get to the squad level at least, and we'll see what happens when they cut it to the actual team.
For me, there's a couple of rucks that I reckon were unlucky. Darcy Cameron and Tristan Cherry. I think if you're looking at rucks, I know Jackson was included, but I'm not sure, is Jackson a forward? Is he an on-baller? Is he a ruck? I didn't think he excelled at probably any of those throughout the year. There's a couple of good games as well. I reckon the big one is Aaron Norton. How did Aaron Norton miss this team? He kicked 60 goals. He had 27 direct assists, 159 score involvements, and Ben King has got in there with 62. He's had 16 less direct assists, and he's had about 40 less score involvements. That's the one for me. And I've done my team, and I've got Aaron Norton at centre-half forward, but he can't be in the team because he's not in the squad.
So I guess the conjecture there would be take a Sam Darcy, and we know that he's, what his potential is and what he's done when he's been fit, but he missed 6 games this year. So I guess, do you ask the question, should Sam Darcy be in the team this year, even though we know the extraordinary potential that he has, and should they maybe have picked someone who has played, closer to a full season? On Aaron Norton, Hayes, I reckon his finish to the season, you're absolutely right, but I would say he was a slow start. So he was really struggling for form for the first 5 or 6 weeks, and then he came good, and he's finished like a steam train at the end. So that may have factored into their reckoning with him. As far as the rucks go, I think Max Gawn's still the king, isn't he? And he's sort of like, when there was a few challenges like Cherry, I mean, Gold Coast are a massive rap for Jared Witts as well. I think Jared Witts should have absolutely been in the conversation for this team as well. So there's a lot of good rucks around, but Max is still the king. And I think the second ruck is always going to be the Phil Thorpe type, or maybe even the Sam Darcy type or the Luke Jackson type, as opposed to that other legit number one ruckman. So yeah, I hear your point, but I'm not overly concerned about that.
At Freo, Corey Wagner's season is over. Surgery to be had on his torn pec. Unfortunately, he's been important for the Fremantle Dockers with the flexibility that he gives. It opens the door for someone. Who do you think will walk through that door? Is it Matty Johnson, Nathan O'Driscoll, Isaiah Dudley, or Cooper Simpson?
If I was comfortable that Matt Johnson was ready, it would be Matt Johnson. I thought Matt Johnson was coming of age when he hurt the ankle against Collingwood. And I clearly remember that game, and he finally worked out how to use his big body in one-on-ones. And a couple of times, just in runs for the ball, he just flat out knocked Collingwood blokes out of the way and cleared a path either for himself or for teammates. So for me, was a really powerful statement for him, and it was a shame that he got hurt. I guess the question they're going to have to ask themselves is, how many physically vulnerable players can they take into a final? Now, we know Nathan Fyfe, whether we like to say it or not, is physically vulnerable, and that's why he's going to play as the sub pretty much, I think, all the way through, as long as Fremantle stay in. And there's just a couple of others. Obviously, Hayden Young is going to be a little bit physically vulnerable because of all the games he has missed. So do you want to take another underdone guy in, or do you want to go with O'Driscoll, even though he has probably not shown great form at AFL level for a few weeks? He played well at Waffle level when dropped back at the weekend. I'm guessing they may lean towards O'Driscoll. I would love to see Matt Johnson in the team, though.
I'm with you. I think it will be Matt Johnson, given the body of work that he put together early in the season. How much do you know about Sam Radford, who's just been appointed to the West Coast Eagles, coming from Melbourne as their midfield coach?
No, not a lot. And so I'll be looking that up and studying very hard before I go on here tomorrow morning. But look, the midfield coach, and Dom can probably speak to this a lot more wisely than me. It's going to be massive for West Coast, because I'm firmly of the view that the first thing West Coast needs to build is the engine room, and that's why the signing of Harley is so important. And I think that will shape their thinking as well at the draft. With those picks 1 and 2, Cooper Duff-Tytler, he's a really exciting prospect, but he's a ruck, and that means you've got to have some patience. Do they go with him as one of those 2 top picks, or do they make sure they get a guy like a Dyson Sharp from South Australia, who looks like a rolled gold 150 to 200 game midfielder? So that's a watch for them. Build the midfield, so that means the midfield coach is going to be a very important person.
Who do you think Fremantle will be playing next Saturday night here at Optus Stadium?
Well, I would think Gold Coast, because I think that Essendon are on their knees. I know Gold Coast fluffed their lines against Port Adelaide, but Port Adelaide is a danger game in Adelaide, and Fremantle found that out when they nearly blew the 4 points against them a couple of weeks back. They're tough to play. They've got a gun midfield. The midfield fired against Gold Coast. I would think Gold Coast won't take any chances here. They'll try and put this game to bed and make a pretty strong statement early, which means they'll probably exceed the 5-goal margin they need to climb above Hawthorn. So I think 6v7 would be Fremantle versus Gold Coast. And while there's travel involved in that, if I was the Gold Coast Suns, I would quite like the idea of the big finals experience. Come to Perth, play in front of 60,000 people at Optus Stadium against Freo, as opposed to go to NG Stadium in Sydney and play in front of 12,000 against the GWS Giants. I reckon, just as an experience to take the group forward, I reckon that experience would be invaluable, win, lose or draw, for Dimmer Hardwick's boys. You speak a lot of sense. We can't wait to listen tomorrow. Don Pike on your show, the CEO of the West Coast Eagles, after the big announcement today that Harley Reid has re-signed for another 2 years at West Coast. Thanks for your time, Duff. Good on you guys.
There he is, Mark Duffield, best in the business. We've had a few texts come through. Phil Como, the signing might silence the likes of McClure, Matty Lloyd and others in the Vic media who are throwing everything at him to go home. That's Phil Como. Hey, boys, West Coast has Hawthorn's first, second and third rounder to use on experienced players this trade period. Yes, they've still got some selections based around Tom Barrass leaving the football club. That's from Tristan in Claremont. Afternoon, Hayes and Dom. Great news on Harley. Eagles appointed a new midfield coach today as well. My question is around trade and free agency for midfielders for the Eagles. Erasmus has been mentioned. How would he complement Harley? Thanks, Peter from Sydney. Well, he's not a free agent, Erasmus, so you'd have to do a trade for him, and his value has gone back up in recent weeks, playing some pretty good games for the Fremantle Dockers. What do you think about the depth? Not depth, but whether one of those sort of players that have been depth at other clubs can come in and have impact with the West Coast Eagles, or would you back in what you've already got and complement it with your first pick, which might be Dersmer or Dyson Sharp?
I think there's an argument for both, Hayes, whether you just want to load up on young kids or you want to get a bit more depth in. So I think with our draft hand at the moment, I think you're going to see a few midfielders in there, and you're going to have seen Brady Hoff, who's played a lot of midfield time this year, and Harley, who's fit, and Tim Kelly's still there. So, I think we've got enough depth and talent about to come in to not warrant needing top-up players, and there's not too many that go from Freo to West Coast or West Coast to Freo either.
Would they be welcome?
I've no doubt it would be welcome, but it doesn't happen often.
Times have changed, in my opinion. We want you to join in any time on the text machine, 0487 736 736, or call through 13 12 55. We're going to do our All-Australian teams next, and we want your thoughts on whether we got it right and who you think is the most unlucky to miss out on the squad of 44.